because this is the program that we've been waiting for. Started last year, if you remember, started talking about Mr. Kimm and all the research in the history of the Kimm family that Diane and Glee have so graciously done. And as I sent out the invitations, I said, come listen to the story about a man named Kimm. Quite the businessman. They named a town after him. I got those lyrics from the Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills. I couldn't go any further with the poem, but without further ado, I turn this over to Glee and Diane, and thank you very much.
Okay. Well, this program really started back in 2023. You might remember that I talked with, Carol Goggin, a friend of mine, and asked her, because she was working for a history department somewhere, a state history department, if she would come and give a talk about Mr. Kimm. Of course, she said yes, she would. And she started looking at the records. And that was in February of 23. And after a few months, I started getting a text from her saying, there's too much here, there's too much, we can't do this, I can't do this, it's too much. But I can give a talk about interesting places in Jefferson County. And if you remember that September of 2023, she did come and she did do that. But I wanted to know more about Mr. Kimm. So Diane and I started down that road, and in the summer of 2023, we went to the Recorder of Deeds, the office in Hillsborough for Jefferson County Deeds, and we were there 10 days. I kept notes. And we were there 2 or 3 hours each of those 10 days looking up deeds. Now this is very complicated until you get in the routine of doing this. Diane has always been with me doing this because she's the tech person. She can walk up to any piece of equipment and they're different every place you go. And she just works with it until she gets it figured out. And then off we go finding deeds. When you go to these different repositories of deeds, you got to be careful with your camera. Always ask if you can take a picture because they do not want you to take a picture of the deed. They want to print that for you, make a copy, and sell it to you. But if you ask kindly, they will let you take a picture of where you're sitting, you know. So that's what we're doing. I've asked Diane, I always ask the questions, and she always gets the answers. So if we are going to speak interchangeably here, she's going to say things, just off the cuff. If you get confused and you say, what are you talking about? I don't understand this deed. Just also speak up because we want you to be involved because we want you to know Mr. Kimm. So the title of our program is Kimm Creates Town. Next. And there is again a little reminder. We talked about Mr. Kimm last June. Remember, he got married last June? Okay, Mr. Kimm, born in 1811 in Germany. He goes back to Germany in 1883. He came here in 1838 when he was 27 years old. He was a merchant, that's what it says when he entered the country. He was unmarried. Now, we're going on from 1850. However, we forgot to tell you one thing that happened in the 1840s. Next. This is Mr. Kimm's document for citizenship. And of course, all of these things are in cursive handwriting. If you don't know cursive, you're going to have a terrible time. And also sometimes when they're printed out for you, they come on different pages. So I had to cut and paste, to get this on one page. But if you can just see here, it's Thursday, November the 2nd of 1848. And Mr. Kimm, a native of Germany, he wants to be admitted as a citizen of the United States. And it says, to the court's satisfaction, he has lived here for at least 5 years in the United States, and he has lived right where he is here now for 1 year in Jefferson County. So it goes on then saying here that he abides with the principles of the Constitution, that he is a man of good morals, and that the court is satisfied with what he has said. Down here it goes on to say that he has taken an oath for the court, that he no longer has any allegiance to any foreign power, especially no allegiance to the Duke of Brunswick, which is where Mr. Kimm is from, in Germany. And it says, therefore, Theodore Kimm is admitted a citizen of the United States. So he becomes a citizen, 1848. Next. 1850 was a big year for Mr. Kimm because he married, which you know, he married Wilhelmina Schmitz, who was a widow. She'd been married to Mr. Peltzer. Her birth and death dates. She arrived in 1848. Mr. Peltzer was already here 1 year. They were in Belleville, Illinois. And she came with their 6-year-old son. He was widowed in 1849. And he was not that old, I've forgotten, 30s or something, 40s. He was not that old, and I'm thinking, what could have happened in 1849? Cholera in St. Louis, maybe. Okay. Anyway, she became a widow in 1849 and married Mr. Kimm in November of 1850. The same year that Mr. Kimm bought his first property in Kimmswick. Next. Okay. Now it gets a little tricky. Now you have to find out, since Kimmswick is in Jefferson County, the deeds for his transactions are in Jefferson County at the courthouse area, but not in the courthouse. Jefferson County has this special building on Maple Street called the Administrative Center, and in the lower level is the Recorder of Deeds. That's where you have to go. Next. When you go there, we happen to be there on a day when nobody else was there. When you go there, you of course meet the people there and you tell them what you want to do, and they take you through doors, and then you're in this room. Diane and I usually ended up right here. Her chair, my chair. She would work with the computer there, and I would sit in that little area and write down what we were hearing. Or I shouldn't say hearing, what we were reading. And Diane, first of all, you had to figure this out, how to work this machine. And between when we started and later on when we finished, that has changed how you do things. But she figures it out.
I asked.
Now, what you have to do when you get there, you have to do certain things. First of all, you have to find out, do you want to find out Mr. Kimm being a grantee? He's buying land? Yes. Or do you want to find out Mr. Kimm a grantor, selling land? No. We want to find out what he's buying. Okay, so that's the first thing you have to put up. Now, next page. If you find on there, and you want a deed, you want his first deed, and it comes up on the screen, and you can press print, and off somewhere they print it for you. But if you can't quite read it, and you'd like to see it a little better, you just look off to your right from that previous picture, and here's the rows of the original Recorder of Deeds books. Written in the handwriting, this is the original, right here. And you just pull it, they start with book A, and it goes to book Z, and then the next book is 1, and it goes on. But these are the original deed books. You just pull it out, put it up on the counter. You can't take a picture of it though, be careful, but you can at least read it if you can't read it from what you see on the screen. Okay, now, next. You have to know, because this will overpower you if you don't understand the system. There are different deeds. The deed at the top is the one you really want to see, the first word on the document. You want it to say deed, because that's telling you that first person owns it and they're selling it. If it says quick claim deed, this is not good. Because a quick claim deed is saying to the seller, to the buyer, I, the seller, don't know if I really own this property, or if I have any interest in this property. I think I do, but I can't prove it to you. So, it's up to you. I'm telling you, that's the situation. That's not good. There's also, when it says indenture, oh my. Then you know you're going to read a deed that's full of notes that have to be paid by certain dates, and this amount by that date, and on and on and on it goes. And even more official, a deed of trust is going to involve three parties: the seller, the buyer, and trustees who are going to make sure that the promissory note is paid on time. So that's the first thing you have to look for. And then when you have a deed in front of you, you'll see right up here, pretty much all the deeds have the following things going for them. There's going to be a date after it tells you what kind of deed it is. Then comes the date, always. Then it's going to tell you who the seller is. Their name's going to be written in there. And then it's going to say party of the first part. That's your seller. You read on. Then it comes to another person, and they're listed as the party of the second part. That's the buyer. Then it goes on to tell you how much money is involved. And then the seller's going to say things like, I grant, I bargain, I sell, I convey, I confirm. They're telling you I own it, and I'm selling it to you, if it's a deed. Quitclaim deed, they might say that, but they don't know for sure. Okay, now comes the legal description of the property. Sometimes this is good because it's been surveyed. Sometimes they're going from cottonwood tree to stake to whatever. These are early deeds. Then comes the signature of the seller. Next paragraph, little space, next paragraph. In those days, it was a justice of the peace. Today, it would be a notary who says, writes, I should say, he writes, I know these sellers, I know who they are, I recognize them. These are the people who say they are. These people, they are. And then he takes the woman, the wife, into a special little area, and he talks to her and says, do you agree with this sale, or is your husband pressuring you to sell? Yeah. And then she has to say, no, I do this on my own free will. Okay. Then he asks, and that's good, and then the document is filed and recorded. Now that's what you have to look for, repeatedly. Next. Here's the first deed. Oh, finally, 1850. Mr. Kimm is buying. But oh no, look at the top. He's buying a quitclaim deed. Oh my goodness. And Cordelia Waters is selling it to Theodore Kimm. And he said $900 is involved here. $1,900, sorry about that, $1,900. And it is the east 1/2 of survey number 1303. Okay, little hint here that we're in the right area, mentions Little Rock Creek. Then it gives this whole great big long description of where this is, and there is Cordelia's signature. Yes, and there it is recorded, October the 5th, 1850. Now here's the problem. Diane and I looked at each other and said, who is Cordelia Waters? We know George Washington Waters lives south of Little Rock Creek, and his wife is Letitia. Could the recorder of deeds made that mistake? No. There is a Cordelia Waters. Okay, so now Diane, this is difficult. Now we have to what you call run the title. You have to find, if Cordelia says she owned it, who did she buy it from? So you have to look at the grantees, because she's receiving it. And back it goes. Now I don't want to say this too long, but take a look at the next page. That's the run of the title. And you would start with Cordelia selling to Kimm, but we took it back, and this is how it goes. Let's do it from earliest date to up to 1850. This ground shows up in our records in Hillsborough in 1847 for the first time at a sheriff's sale, because the Bird heirs maybe didn't pay the taxes or whatever they didn't do, but they sold it to Skelton Richardson. So these are the grantors, they own it. Those are the people who are buying it. Now what did Skelton Richardson do? Here, on the same day, Skelton Richardson sold the east one half of the survey to a Freeman Waters. Okay? Now what did he do? He, in March of 49, later, he quitclaimed that deed to James Sappington. What did he do? He, a few months later, same year, quitclaimed that deed back to Cordelia Waters. Not Freeman, Cordelia Waters. What did she do? She quitclaimed that deed in 1850. This is where we get into it. She quitclaimed it to Theodore Kimm. That's that first deed you just looked at. And on the same day, Skelton Richardson, who was the first guy up there who received it from the Byrds, he quitclaimed the eastern one half of the western one half of Survey 1303. So what did I just say? Now Mr. Kimm owns 3/4 of Survey 1303, yes? He bought half from Cordelia, and he bought a second little half of a half from Skelton Richardson. That's the worst. Now, where is this property next? This map is in our museum on the wall right here with the mastodon display. And this is the area right here. This is Survey 1303. And this is the Little Rock Creek entering the Mississippi. And of course, you can recognize this is Kimmswick, yes? We've got the right deed. We're where we should be. Okay. But when I looked at this, Survey 1303, yep, it's on paper, there's a man's name, Peter Dorian. Now, I was a history teacher, 8th graders, Kirkwood, and I know that name. Let's see, Mr. Dorian. Well, look, we forgot this. We forgot the problem with Cordelia and Freeman. Freeman was Cordelia's husband, but he died very early, 1849, at the age of 32. He's buried in Richardson Cemetery. So she's signing now as his widow, and he's deceased. Okay, so we know who Cordelia is. She's the wife of Freeman. He's dead. Next. Closer up, you can see the name Peter Dorian. 1303, his legal representatives, Peter Dorian, okay, that's it. Bigger now for you can see, Little Rock Creek, there's what's going to become Kimmswick. Okay, we're going. Now let's look at Peter Dorian. Okay, here he is. That's old Dorian. Born in 1840 in Canada, Quebec. 1840? 1740, sorry. Thank you. See, I want you to speak up like that when you make a mistake. Yes, join in, raise your hand. Okay, 1840, he was born, and 1740, he was born in Quebec, Canada. He has 11 siblings. A few of them become fur traders. He's a skilled French fur trader. He comes south in the late 1700s. He lives with the Yankton Sioux, and he marries an Indian lady. Her name is Holy Rainbow, and they have 12 children. He is French. He's Pierre Dorian. How I've always, Peter Dorian is English. Pierre Dorian is French. He's French. Okay, so he is married to Holy Rainbow. And I say that, 12 children, because I'm looking for any other Peter Dorians. And there's no other Peter Dorians in his family, except he calls his firstborn son Pierre Dorian Jr. So there's only 2 Pierre Dorians. Now, this is interesting. This man's a fur trader. He's with the Sioux. He's on the Missouri River. You know who these 2 men are? Yes, who said that?
Lewis
Did you say
Clark.
that, Mary? Somebody said that.
Lewis and Clark.
Yeah, good. Yes. This red-haired guy, this is William Clark. And this is Meriwether Lewis. Because as they are going up the Missouri River on the Coral Discovery, 1804, going upriver, they meet him coming down the river with a load of furs and buffalo grease. Okay, and they stop, they talk. They find out that old Dorian, because he's like 64 years old now, Clark calls him repeatedly Old Dorian. They find out that he's lived with the Sioux, and he knows their language, and he knows their customs, and he's married to a Sioux lady. And of all the preparations for the Coral Discovery, everything they took with them, they did not have an interpreter. And here he is. So, they sign him on. They send his furs farther downriver to St. Louis, where he was taking them. They buy his buffalo grease, because that's good to put on your skin to keep off the mosquitoes. And Dorian goes north with them. Okay, next. Now I'm saying to Diane, okay, let's find out. I want a copy of the original Spanish land grant, because this land on which you're sitting right now was owned by Spain in the later 1700s. Okay. A Spanish governor in some year deeded that land to Pierre Dorian, and I want to know who that man was, and I want to know the year. So she starts. She gets on the computer and tell how this happened. Because here we are in the St. Louis County office.
It's at the Clark branch of the library up in Frontenac. And they have a history area, and the people are very helpful. If you ever want to go up there and look up anything, they were very helpful. And they have some things there. Glee kept saying, well, you can get the Spanish land grants in St. Louis. And I really didn't want to go to the city hall in St. Louis if I could avoid it. So I tried here, and so we were half successful.
Yes, so we went there, and Diane's kind of explaining what she already knows and what she wants, and oh yes, okay, they would. By the way, we had to spend a lot of time just paying attention to these very cute lampshades they have over all this stuff.
And they have really fancy bathrooms too.
Yes, but this is new equipment, and Diane just sits down and is just beginning to get started. And with some help, we found the first piece of documentation. And here it is, and it's a survey. And of course, at the very top, there's giving you number 1303. And then he says, survey for the legal representatives of Peter Dorian. Okay, so that's good. You read a little bit more, and down there they're measuring from a cottonwood tree. But here you see again Little Rock Creek. So we're not going to spend a lot of time going through every word. But we know that this is, see that river again? You're beginning to see how that Rock Creek flows. This is the land grant. Well, that was good, but didn't give the name of the governor and the year. So then they had another one. I think we got this the same day, didn't we?
I found this at home though.
Oh, okay.
I found this online.
Okay. Well, when you had a land grant, there were people moving in all the time. The country had immigrants. And you had to, if you'd had it a long time, like 30 years from Spain, maybe somebody else was on your land, and you said, this is mine, get off. Well, then you had to have it approved. And there was the United States government, when they got this land, when it was bought by Jefferson from Napoleon, that's a whole other story. But anyway, they had to then take it before commissioners to say, no, Pierre Dorian's grant is good. It was given to him, it's been surveyed, it is his. It is his, that's it.
And there were certain other criteria too that you had to have. You had to have someone live on it and things like that. There were other criteria other than just having it surveyed.
Right. A Spanish land grant even went into even more details than that. But anyway, here they said, okay, yes, it's his. And here's the signature of the 3 officials. They have to be very careful with land, you know, because people fight over land. Not only do people fight, countries fight. Land is important. You either own it or you don't own it. One of the two. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. It's one way or the other. Okay, so now the next one, we're going back because I wanted to tell you, now Dorian is with Lewis and Clark, and they're not too far north, really. This is Nebraska, this is South Dakota, and this is the Missouri River running here. And the Yankton Reservation is just right in this area. And next, from St. Louis up the Missouri River, it's 642 miles. And so Dorian goes with them in 1804 all the way up to the Mandan village where they spend the winter. Now, a little later on in time,
There you go.
yes, at that site in Yankton, South Dakota, they found bones along the river. They were digging for clay, for bricks. But a historian must have done research and decided it was where Dorian was buried. And so now in Yankton, South Dakota, they have this huge monument there in the memory of Peter Dorian. Okay, and I'm thinking, folks, that I think we ought to have an exhibit of this in our museum, because where you are sitting right now was once a Spanish land grant, and Pierre Dorian was involved in it. And I like it so much because my house, you know, on River Street is also in the same land grant. And so I like to say that I live on land that Pierre Dorian once owned. But now, let's go and get into Mr. Kimm, because now he's got his deed and you know the background. He bought it, it's a quitclaim deed, but he bought it. Next. Kimm Deeds. He's the grantor now. He bought this whole thing, and I'm thinking it must be nothing on it because, you know, nobody's disputing his claim. It must have been pretty much just ground. Anyway, he starts to sell just a few things. Mainly this one right here is where he's working with the railroad. He's thinking about his town. He hasn't made it official, hasn't taken it to Hillsborough yet, but he's telling the railroad if they come through, if they will stop, he will build a depot. Okay. He's creating his town. 1859 is the year he does it. He takes it to Hillsborough. He files it. Now it's on record. And you can come and buy lots. Okay, we're going to see a picture of that later. 1860, 61, there are a few, but look what happens. There's the Civil War. This is not good. This stops everything, war. Then nothing happens much, 62, 63, 64, 65, the war ends, and then things take off for Mr. Kimm. Okay, so let's get back and see what happens next year. We're going to start with 1860, because there's 2 big sales in 1860 you have to know about. Okay, next. The first one is a sale of the north half portion of lot number 18. This is Market Street. You know, you come into town and you go this way, and then you go this way down Market Street. This area right here, Mr. Kimm sells to a Mr. Anton Herman. And this is where what we think, well, we know a brewery was there at some time. Let's do the next one. This is the deed. Now, we're not going to go through it all, but Theodore Kimm and Wilhelmina, because he's married. Here's Mr. Anton Herman who's buying it. He's paying $800 for it. He's buying the northern half of block number 18. Mr. Kimm has written in the deed that he can't put up any whiskey shop on the premises until the promissory note to buy this property has been paid. Okay? And then Mr. Kimm says, signs over there. Then the notary takes Wilhelmina aside and says, do you really want to do this? Has he put any pressure on you to sell this property? She He says, no, I agree. And so then it's recorded. Now, you know this piece of property? Are you with me on it? This is where the timber frame house is built. Okay, next. This is what's going on in the beer industry. So anybody that knows about beer, beer was brewed since ancient times, and it was drunk warm. It was called ale. But it was made with rye or wheat or corn or whatever. It would become alcoholic. But in the early 1800s, well, late, what am I trying to say, 1870s, middle part of the 1800s, the Germans figured out how to brew this beer and keep it cold. This was before refrigeration, as it's saying up here. So you had to have a place where this beer could be kept cold. That's called lager. Now somebody who knows beers could explain this much better than me. I don't know a lot about beer. But anyway, they needed a cool place. So we just followed along with the story. And next. And in our museum is this picture that says this was built on the lot, which we know it is, but there's something unusual here about this, because we don't think it was Franz A. Herman. We think his name was Anton Herman. And we don't think it was 1859, because he didn't buy the property until 1860. And not only does it have this beautiful house, but next, well, this is my picture of it in 2020, but this is the house, and underneath this big patio area with a roof over it, you know what's under here? The next picture. This big vault. This big vault's under there. Now, why is that vault under there? Because you can keep beer cool under there. You can get ice off the Mississippi River, and you can cool and keep your beer. Well, terrific. Now, there's a problem in addition to who built this thing and when they built it, because just last Saturday, Diane comes to me with a piece of thing, which she just found something in the newspaper. You can go to newspapers.com, look up a certain thing. Next, what did you find, Diane? You can explain this.
It's basically, he must not have brewed what he needed to brew or whatever, because he lost it basically. And Mr. Kimm took the property back after.
It's a trustee's sale.
So
From Anton Herman and his wife Helena, that they did not pay the promissory note, which was for $800. And so they lost the property. And it goes on to say down here, it's hard to read, but if I could find it really quick, they're going to sell it right here. The property will be sold at the platform of the railroad at the town of Kimmswick on November the 20th, 30th, 1865. It's hard to read, but he lost the property. Now, we had found previously a deed where Mr. Kimm resold the property in 1865 for $700. Now see, that's another problem. If that house and that vault are on that property, it's worth much more than $700. Did Mr. Herman do anything? Or is this built by somebody a little later on? Because Diane is starting to find things about the Meyer Brewery, which I haven't seen. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I mean, all I've seen are just that they would ship beer and stuff like that. You just had to give them your address or whatever. But I don't know anything more than that. It was just an ad in the papers. It just says Meyer Brewery.
You said it appears a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to look into that to see, because the person that we found on the deed who bought it, can't quite read his name. It's a Winfred, that's a last name or something. But he paid $700 when Mr. Herman had bought it for $800. So it's going down in value. It certainly couldn't have a house and a vault on it. Buying it and brewing it there, probably using what's there. Okay, so that's an unfinished story. But also in 1860, next page, Mr. Kimm sells one lot to a Mr. William Fritter. Okay, and he sells this lot. See, here you're on Market Street. Here's the creek. There's the river over there past the railroad. This is this lot right here, number 13. He sells on Market Street to a Mr. William Fritter. And in 1861,
What's the last name?
Fritter, F-R-I-T-T-E-R, William Fritter. And 1 year later, 1861, because you're running the titles, you know, you keep looking, well, who'd he get it from, who'd he sell it to? He sold it to Frederick William Ziegler. Yes, and that is the beginning of the Ziegler name in Kimmswick. Okay, next page. This is what it looks like today. This is not lot 13. Lot 13 is right over there. This is lot 14. Next slide. This would be lot 13. This is lot 12. And that's lot 11 down there. So what was on this lot is now gone. But it was the first Ziegler purchase. And then one more slide shows you the rest of the block. This is an alley right here, and then this building's new and the bakery's at the end. And that's what's happening on Market Street. But now Mr. Ziegler is in town. Yes? And this lot has a 2-story house on it, which is good. It's 1861. All right, next slide. This is from my research on my family. Because you'll notice at the top, this says 80th Regiment Enrolled Missouri Militia Captain Yerger. Serving under him, Ziegler, Frederick W., First Lieutenant. Company F, age 38. Now what's going on here? Well, Captain Ziegler, he's the man who founded Antonia, and he's my great-great-grandfather.
Captain Yerger.
Captain Yerger, what did I say?
I thought you said Ziegler. But
Captain Yerger, okay. And this was just organized locally because of the Civil War, 1861. The war started 3 days before Ziegler bought the house. So now everybody's getting tense, war's coming, and it had been going badly. Even before that, tensions, because you remember Missouri entered the Union as a slave state, only because Maine entered at the same time as a free state, and that was okay with the Senate. They had a slave and a free, that kept equal. But now, Germans were coming, like Ziegler, like Kimm, and they were coming into Missouri, into St. Louis, through the state, into what was going to be Kansas, and those Germans didn't want Kansas to become a slave state. But Missourians who'd been here for a long time said, well, it's right next to us. It should be a slave state. And they had almost 10 years of fighting, guerrilla fighting in Kansas, these little groups. And it was called Bloody Kansas, if you want to read about it. It was a mess. And so things just got worse and worse and worse. Then the South attacks a fort in Charleston Harbor, Fort Sumter, April of 1861, and the war is on. That's it. Okay, the North is fighting the South. Now, the Union had to get armies going, but first of all, they had to protect the rail transportation lines coming out of St. Louis with supplies, and they had no Union army here at the time yet, so they asked the counties to organize little groups to defend the trestles, the wooden trestles, and so that the guerrillas wouldn't sneak in and burn them. And there was a real problem here because our governor at the time, whose name was Claiborne Fox Jackson, he was a Southern sympathizer. And the man who had been governor before him was Sterling Price. Sterling Price governed the state from 53 to 57. Nadine knows him. and he was a Southern sympathizer. And he's now in Arkansas, and he's got a Southern army already. He fought in the Mexican War. He has credentials. And they were worried in this state that Price would come up from Arkansas. He would come into St. Louis. Why St. Louis? Dave Brock knows about this. because St. Louis had a big arsenal. And in that arsenal, there was a lot of ammunition. You know around where Arsenal Street is today? Yeah. Right. And that had to be protected. So the Union got to going. They sent in Nathaniel Lyon. Nathaniel Lyon led some Union troops. They went out, they kicked the governor out of Jefferson City, and they established martial law in St. Louis, and a provisional governor in the capital of our state. What's martial law? Civilians are no longer in charge in St. Louis. Military is in charge. All directions are going to come from the provost marshal. He's going to oversee everything. Crimes, sabotage, whatever. He's in charge. It's martial law. Okay. My great-great-grandfather, he was one of the little local people. Okay, you're going to come here and guard this bridge across the Rock Creek, your little unit, little F company here, and also at Sulphur Springs until we get the big army here to look at. Okay. And he's a captain. Ziegler is a first lieutenant. Next page. As time goes on, 3 months, that is done away with because an army comes, and they're now called the 5th Missouri Infantry Regiment. And it says their first mission was guarding bridges and the St. Louis Iron Mountain Railroad. Okay. Because we know that Captain Ziegler has at some time in his history been called Captain Ziegler, but right now all we see him called is First Lieutenant. So I'm thinking he joined this group after my great-great-grandfather in 3 months went back to his farm. Okay, now this is what Carol Goggin, next one, started giving me. See her name at the top? She read the records that are in the Provost Marshal's office, written in cursive. And it seems like Mr. Kimm was having a problem with that Company F soldiers that were here. He is complaining of outrageous penetration by men of the 5th Infantry stationed at Kimmswick under the command of Lieutenant Ziegler. Lieutenant Ziegler lives in Kimmswick. He has a house in Kimmswick. Okay, so Mr. Kimm goes on. He says, whilst the pillaging was going on, the postmaster of the place came to my house. That's Mr. Luchtemar. We know who he is. He says he could identify at least 5 of the men. See, they're local people. They're just called here to guard these things. To seek records from the commander of the post here would be useless, as experience has shown, and to go to Sulphur Springs would be, in my opinion, very unsafe. So next, there's Mr. Ziegler. His picture is in our museum with the Ziegler display. There's Mr. Ziegler. Next one. So Mr. Kimm goes on to say, at about 11 o'clock I observed a man in my orchard in the dress of a sergeant, and I suppose taking peaches without my knowledge or consent. I went to him saying if he wants some fruit to ask for it. And he answered grossly that he had a right to take and need not ask. I denied his right and asked his name, which he refused to give, finally stating he belonged to Colonel Colton's regiment. Upon his refusing to give his name and he remaining on the premises, I went to the fence and called for assistance from the fort nearby and occupied by militia, but no one came to my assistance, says Mr. Kimm. The said man followed me to the fence, and all at once some 4 or 5 of his comrades appeared outside the fence, partly climbing the fence. You want to take the last 2 paragraphs?
I told them that they had no right to come over my fence or to pillage my property, and upon their assertion that they had such right, I reminded them of General Order Number 4 and called out once more for assistance from the militia, whereupon one of the said men struck me with his fist on the breast. Mrs. Kimm, attracted by the noise, came up and begged me to go to the house, which I did, whilst the soldier poured over the fence, pillaged my orchard and grapery for about a half an hour, and then, with filled bags, repaired to the hand car on the railroad and returned to Sulphur Springs.
He goes on. Next. On Sunday the 7th, about 5 p.m., Lieutenant Ziegler was sitting on the railroad station at Kimmswick, opposite my orchard, speaking to one or more of his men who, at the time, were taking apples from trees in my orchard and without my knowledge or consent. Ziegler got a part of said apples. Of the above, I have no personal knowledge. He didn't see it. but it can be proved by good testimony. There were people in Kimmswick that saw these soldiers doing it. Now it says this afternoon, Kimm is still writing to the provost marshal because he's got a complaint. He's talking to these soldiers, he's talking to Ziegler, they're not reacting. This afternoon about 4 p.m., Ziegler called on me, appeared to be extremely sorry for what had happened. Said it was done without his knowledge or consent. He had but little or no control over the men, but would do his best. Requested me not to report to headquarters, which I promised on condition that he would prevent further disorderly behavior of the men and enforce military discipline and laws, particularly General Order Number 4. He seemed to have no knowledge of said order, whereupon, at his request, I read and explained it to him. He seemed to be astonished at the contents, said the orders he received from headquarters were different. I remarked there was perhaps an understanding between the two contending parties to stop unnecessary hardships of the war. At any rate, the order was in force, and I presumed had to be obeyed. Lieutenant Ziegler seemed to be fully convinced and left, apparently satisfied. Okay, next letter from Kimm. This letter goes directly to Lieutenant Ziegler. He says, Sir, I deem proper to inform you as commander of this post of the following fact. Last night at 9:30, 2 soldiers of your command appeared at my premises and demanded the key for my well house for the purpose of getting water. One of them, who at my request gave his name, being armed with a musket and a bayonet fixed in order to avoid any misunderstanding, I now politely request you so inform me in writing, if you deem proper, whether the above was done by your order, and if not, whether it meets with your consent. You see what's happening between Mr. Ziegler and Mr. Kimm? This is not good. This is not good. Next, he goes on. Yesterday afternoon, several soldiers of your command entered my orchard without my permission. Have they a right to do so? The bearer of this letter will call for an answer in a reasonable time. Very respectfully, your obedient servant, Theodore Kimm. And he sent this letter through his postmaster, which is that Mr. Luchtermeyer again. Okay, so here's his 1862. He is complaining. These letters are all going to the provost marshal in St. Louis. So what happened? 1863, the next year, Mr. Kimm, he is charged with secreting 38,000, these are caps, bronze. They go in a gun to set off the, yeah, Ken knows, he's nodding, okay. And he's got sacks of buckshot. They arrest him. They've had enough of this talk. They arrest Mr. Kimm, they take him with Captain Thompson and commit him to the Myrtle Street prison. And you've heard a little bit about the Myrtle Street prison from the man who gave a talk a couple of years, maybe last year. It was not good in the Myrtle Street prison. That's the old slave pens of, what was that man's name? I forgot.
Bradshaw did the
Yes.
talk for us.
Yes, so now Mr. Kimm is in jail. Because his orchards, his apples, his peaches, his grapes were being eaten by these guys. But he's released within 4 or 5 days. How'd that happen? Next page. Mr. Kimm has to write a letter that he is a farmer. He resides in Jefferson County. He says he was arrested the 11th day of May by Captain Thompson, charged with having 38,000 caps in his possession, that he can account for them being there because he kept a store in Kimmswick, and at one time he had 100,000 caps on hand. That was in 1859. He had not been able to sell all of them, so in essence what he did, he took the stock out of the store and took it to his house for safekeeping. He says, I deny the charge of being a Southern sympathizer, and I am a good, staunch Union man as ever lived. Sworn and subscribed before me, 21st day of March. And they let him go. So Mr. Kimm is back. Now, that could be the end of the story, but it isn't. Because we know Mr. Ziegler. We've been to the Rauschenbach Cemetery and to the Kimmswick City Cemetery, and Mr. Ziegler is buried in the Kimmswick City Cemetery. And when you go to the cemetery, Diane took a picture, and that is his grave. There's a tree growing right next to it. But here, it's hard to read. We'll get into this later on, it's not at this program. But this is Frederick Ziegler, and he died in 1865 in
January.
January 11th, yes. And he's born in 23, so that makes him 42 years old when he dies. And he's buried there. Now, he's a young man. Did he go on with the 5th Missouri? We haven't looked up his military record. We don't know. Maybe he was wounded with the 5th Military. We don't know. But anyway, he's died. But he knew he was ill. He knew he was sick because he wrote a will. Now, you can find this will. Next slide. If you go to the college in Hillsborough, Jefferson, what's its official name? Junior College?
Jefferson College.
Jefferson College. In the library, there is a history center. And I was so happy that my car made it there. First attempt, it didn't make it there. We had to have it towed. But this attempt, it made it there. And Diane took this picture of me. We're going to find Mr. Ziegler's will. See if it will tell us what he died of. So, next picture. I took that because I thought it was so good I couldn't give it up. That is just lovely. The history center's on the first floor, next picture. And you just walk in there. You call them beforehand. This is a lot of little details. And tell them what will you're looking for. They get it for you. They bring it to this table. And they put the documents right there in front of you. Next picture. This is the copy of Mr. Ziegler's will. And you can sit there and put your hands on it and read it. And what he says is not anything that he knows he's sick. He admits he's sick, but he's of sound mind. And he gives everything to his beloved wife, Francesca. And he goes on to give $5 to his only son, 5-year-old Michael. And he gives $5 to his 11-month-old daughter, Wilhelmina. And that's basically his will. Everything goes to his wife. And then I said to myself, he calls his little girl who's 11 months old, Wilhelmina. And what's Mr. Kimm's wife's name? Wilhelmina. I don't know what was going on between those two guys. They loved each other or hated each other. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, that's the story of Mr. Ziegler. Now, next picture. Okay. Now we're back to what you really came to hear, but this is just 2 minutes. Because when the war is over, the sales pick up. The latter part of the 1860s are good for sales. And by 1869, all of these things in yellow are lots that Mr. Kimm has sold. And his town is developing. You ask, these little lines here are alleys. These are streets. There's no record of what company laid this out for him. Did he do this work himself? I don't know, but he'd sold a lot. See, here's the old brewery lot again, number 18. Down here, all of these lots now, where Mr. Ziegler's 13 was, they've all been sold to other Zieglers now. And there's just, there's some area, lots going on there. He sold a lot. He's done a lot. Okay, so now we need to find out a couple of last things here. Mr. Ziegler, let me see if I have it. Yeah. I want to show you that Mr. Kimm had made certain things already for the use of the public. And one of them was this. Where's the school? Here it is. Here. Mr. Kimm wrote a deed in the 60s saying that he would give this ground if the city of Kimmswick would build a brick school. But who's going to oversee that? Well, he listed 3 men. And one of those men who's supposed to oversee this, to see that this is done, his name is Franz Naes. Now, Franz Naes later becomes known as Franz Naes. And Franz Naes, his blood is in this room because Kenny is a great-great-grandson of Franz Naes, and Ben and Sam are great-great-great-grandsons of Franz Naes. And Franz Naes had not bought any land in Kimmswick yet. So they knew each other. Isn't that nice? They knew each other. They trusted each other. I think it's great. Mr. Kimm also gave this area, Jefferson Square, for public use. But he kept this part right here forever as a Kimmswick burial ground, a Kimm family burial ground. And these two white places here, one for a Catholic church, one for a Protestant church. Of course, they were never built, so now Jefferson Square is just all Jefferson Square. Okay, so I'm saying to Diane, I don't know how to sum this up because we can't tell you the names of all these people who bought all this land because we don't know them. The deed does not say what occupation they had. It does not say what they did with the land when they bought it. You then have to run the title on every one because they're probably selling it or whatever, you know? And it goes on and on and on. But then on Saturday, Diane says, tell me what you said. I found a newspaper article.
I found this newspaper article and it just lists different things that are in town.
Let me give you the date.
1867.
Yes, it's from the Jefferson Democrat, January the 4th, 1867. And it says Jefferson County, progress in the past year, new buildings, freighting business, sales, merchandise, manufactures, Kimmswick. Kimmswick begins to wear the appearance of a business town. So many of the buildings are of brick, and all being of good size. The whole place took a substantial and permanent. The whole place looks substantial and permanent. Most of the persons settling there are Germans, and they are determined that industry shall make up for any lack of capital. There are now in Kimmswick 3 stores, 2 or 3 groceries, 2 hotels, we believe, 2 blacksmiths, a drugstore, a boot and shoe shop, a brewery, new brick schoolhouse, they built it, butcher shop, brickyard, besides several residences, and the following comprise the new buildings. And there is that brewery. Now their name Meyer goes with it. It's worth $6,000. Okay, a hotel, a schoolhouse, butcher shop, saloon, blacksmith shop, wagon shop, store, saloon. There's that Meyer name again. Up there, Meyer. Meyer must have a really big store. He was also the postmaster, but a friend of Mr. Kimm from the very beginning. Helped him when he was fighting the army. Soccer, Seckman. Oh, this is Nadine's interested in Mr. Broom and Anderson because they bought the mill. And they were grinding corn and wheat and rye and doing quite well. The mill story is a good one. Nadine's working on that, I think. Okay, Meyer, Seaman, brick manufacturers, there's Meyer again. Lager, beer manufacturing, and they're selling freight. Hunt and Company have a cooper shop. You know what a cooper does?
Barrels.
Makes barrels, yes, probably for beer. He employs 4 men and does a good business. We did not learn the extent of its manufacturers. The 2 new stores and the drugstore have 2 recently commenced businesses to report sales, but they have prepared good stocks and are doing very well. All mechanics are gaining ground, and the general businesses of the place have increased 50% during the past year. And most of the merchandising business is still done by Meyer, who is so well and favorably known that nothing can divert his patronage. The Rock Creek Mill by Bruin and Anderson does a larger business than any other similar establishment in the county and takes good care to maintain the high character of its manufacturers. And 260 cars of wood were shipped at Kimmswick in 1866. Why are they shipping wood? Steamboats need wood, and people heating their homes need wood, so they're cutting trees around here and shipping it. And
Starve air pollution.
there you go. And I said to Diane, well, you know, we could research every single person whose name is here, but, you know, that would take hours, days, weeks, months. And so I think that's a perfect ending to the program. That's Mr. Kimm up to 1870. Now, he's still here in the 70s, and the sales continue on. But now he no longer has to worry about a war. He's past that. And remember when he first got here, wasn't so good either. He had a store in St. Louis, it burned, 1841. And another store in St. Louis, it burned, 1849. And there was cholera, and there was a civil war. But Mr. Kimm's still here, 1870, and maybe next year we'll end the story. We have a little work to do. So that's it.
So great.
question, I know it was a lot, but they have a question about it. I just don't know who did the basic work that got this town, you know, a surveyor or whatever, I don't know. We have no records from Mr. Kimm at all. Not one book of sales, nothing. 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 All right, that's it.